Good morning everyone, welcome to Monday morning's Lift Devotion. Grab yourself a cup of coffee, get your breakfast and let's dig into the Word. What has happened to the world almost defies belief. It's difficult to comprehend what has happened and how quickly it has paralysed society. It took me some time to get my head around the magnitude of this pandemic crisis, and I'm sure that you must have been the same. Although we're in the middle of a serious situation, it's important not to spend all your time listening to doom-laden messages. I'm hoping and trusting that we all can start thinking towards the future. It's amazing what small glimmers of light can do for our morale when we have been in the dark. On Saturday morning I was able to play 9 holes of golf with my younger brother. I've not seen him face to face for 4 months and the golf was great, and see, my brother was okay too. Apart from having to socially distance, not touching the flag and having foam inserts in the hole so we didn't have to pick up our balls out of the hole, it was almost as though life had returned to normal, and that was great. We are taught that trials come but for a short time and don't last. We read this in Psalm 30 verse 5. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. It should be as expected and anticipated as the sunshine inevitably comes after a heavy storm. This morning I want to encourage you to understand these rhythms of life as taught by the Bible, and understand that God is also in control always. You can focus on the clear and present danger if you want to upset yourself. There are lots of ways that you can make yourself anxious and fearful. If you really want to, you can even calculate what your chances of dying from coronavirus is based on your age, sex and underlying medical conditions. I wouldn't recommend it, particularly if you're an older male who is overweight with some underlying medical conditions. Then it really isn't a good place to go. In surgery we've started to see a new medical syndrome. It's called corona-based anxiety. To some degree it has been made worse because it is the single topic of conversation. The media is doom-laden and people are very often much isolated. It's an incredible powerful ingredient to fuel our worries and fears. An important piece of advice we are giving to people with corona-based anxiety is don't spend too much time listening to the news. Personal stories can be harrowing and also the economic headlines can be frightening, but we can only cope with so much of it in our daily diet. Spend a good part of the day doing something active, and if possible, do something that helps others so that you're not being introspective and thinking about yourself too much. When you're in the middle of trouble, time seems to slow down. It's incredible to think that all this has happened is a 2020 phenomenon, with the first report coming out of Wuhan, China on the 31st of December 2019. Even now, the time of the initial pandemic which swept the nations, when toilet rolls, chicken breasts and cleaning products were nowhere to be seen, feels like something in the distant past. Yet it is what occupied our thoughts just 2 months ago. Who stockpiled lots of stuff as a result? Hopefully no one is worrying about those issues now, and hopefully the stockpile's going down. God is with us in any and every situation. That awareness and knowledge is a great comfort, even if we don't know what the outcome will eventually be. God is with us in this situation, but it might not be until after it's over that we understand how much God was with us. We can, however, have confidence that He is in control. There are many stories in the Old Testament of God's people being in far worse situations than we are currently facing. Often it was when they were facing a much stronger foe than them, and sometimes were facing complete annihilation. Think of the time when the children of Israel was escaping Egypt and were being chased by the Egyptian army. The chasing army was swallowed up by the Red Sea. Later on they faced the Amalekites and they prevailed as long as Moses held up his arms. Into the promised land they must have thought back to what the 12 spies had reported when they saw the strength of the city of Jericho's fortifications. Yet God caused those walls to fall and delivered the city into his people's hands. What about Gideon defeating a whole army with just 300 men, armed with trumpets, pitchers and lights? Gideon didn't achieve this himself, he was just obedient. God delivered the Midianite army into Gideon's hands. However, one story always comes to my mind when I think of the transformation from utter despair to complete release, and it's found in the book of Kings. I want us to use it this morning to encourage you how quickly God can turn around situations. In 2 Kings verse 6 and 7, read that the Samaritans were trapped in a terrible siege and were being starved into submission. God's prophet Elisha had really wound up the enemy into a frenzy of hate. People talked about cannibalism and even eating their own sons, and even buying a donkey's head to eat cost thousands of pounds. You can only imagine being so hungry that you would think of eating something like a donkey's head. And then can you imagine paying all you own to buy it? The passage is shocking, but clearly shows how desperate the situation was. It was as bad as it could possibly be. In a siege situation, enemies often couldn't break down strong walls and fortifications, but they could break down the people's morale and will to continue to resist. Our morale shouldn't be broken when we know that we can rely on God. When the king of Israel heard of these stories and saw with his own eyes how bad things were, he was distraught. He turned his anger against God and his prophet Elisha. He sent an executioner to kill Elisha. The king proclaimed that this trouble had come directly from God and stated that he was fed up with God and was fearful of what was to come next. God, through Elisha, promised that the famine was over even then, and food prices will be back to normal very quickly. The representative of the king was incredulous. 4 lepers stuck outside the city walls discovered that God had sent the sound of a mighty army to the enemies of the city, and they had fled, leaving everything. Once the camp had been looted, food prices dropped overnight, and the people of the city were free. Many people cried out at first, "I don't believe it." They thought that it was a trick to draw them out of the city because what had happened to them was so incredible. They carefully checked the situation, and it was all true. The enemy had gone and the crisis was over. This morning, I want us to have confidence and belief that this crisis will end and that God is in complete control. Let us look to the future with hope, knowing that God will be with us and he will lead us out of this current difficult time. Have a great day, and just remember that tomorrow evening, Graham will be continuing his Bible study looking at love. Join him at 7:30 and then join us all for a Zoom discussion afterwards at 8 p.m. Our weekly prayer meeting is at 7:30 again on Thursday. Have a great day.